Okay, you should be ready to go. You're good to go.
Sounds great. Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone to the meeting of the Finance Committee. Today is Tuesday, November 2nd, 2021, also known as Election Day. And for anyone out there watching who has not yet made it to the polls, please, of course, remember to go out and do your civic duty there. It is 1:06 p.m. Here live on a digital platform. The chair was late, nothing new there, me being the chair. So I apologize to anyone who was waiting a bit on the beginning of the meeting. All right, present. Here we have a whole host of folks from City Council. We have myself, Elizabeth Mealy, as well as Adam Yoder and Bonnie Katz from the Finance Committee. We also have, looks like I'm not seeing any other members of City Council right now. Oh, Randy Allison is here by phone, President of City Council. From the administration, we have Chief Snyder from the police. We have Mark Killian from the fire department, Chief Killian from the fire department, Skip Memmy from community development, Joe Podlock from finance, Mayor Slaughter, Kayla Drummond from recreation, and Peg Woodring, of course, from the controller's office. If I've missed anyone, Janice, I see you're also on here. You can probably get the role yourself, but if I've missed anyone, please forgive me. Okay, we have several items on today's meeting, but hopefully not as many or as much to discuss as we've had at the last two meetings. We're going to go ahead and kick it off with item number 1, which is a discussion on recreation expenses. We've been intending to discuss this for the last couple of meetings, and it's high time we get there. Ms. Drummond, would you like to talk a little bit about recreation expenses for this year?
So just to go over and to recap, the email I received this morning from you was about all of the events throughout the year, as well as our recreation program through the summer day camp. I'm open to answer any questions that you have. This year was what I like to call our bounce back year, coming off of COVID and not having anything productive. I can't even say productive, any events, anything to offer the community due to the stipulations that were set in front of us. So if you have any questions, I'm free to answer them.
Okay. I had emailed Ms. Black a number of questions last night, or Ms. Drummond, excuse me, just so that she had a little bit of forewarning about what I was curious to know. But I'll also, other members of the committee, do you guys have any questions that you'd like to start off with?
I think the first question I would have, Liz, is about personnel and payroll. It seems like you're over budget on payroll. Could you please address that?
Yes, our personnel over the summer was Step AmeriCorps as well as city employees. Our Step AmeriCorps was right where we planned it to be. Unfortunately, for our city employees was a little different. We had a bunch of hiccups, ones that we've never faced before, to the point where our staff was talking amongst themselves, relaying why this person got paid this person got paid that. And it just jumped. And for both of our sites, we had 2 sites, one Brandon, one Memorial. We always have a lead counselor at both 2 just to offset. So one isn't there, the other one would step into place. So if that person had off or called off, we had a substitute lead counselor, and it got a little out of hand. It was addressed and it was handled, but unfortunately that left us with an overage.
I guess the question I think, we are all questioning is that we went with AmeriCorps because of costing us less money. How many city employees did you hire?
We had, I believe, 7.
7 city employees?
If I'm not mistaken, yes. I don't have access to all of my files right now to give you an exact, I can't, like off the top of my head, I say 7. My computer, I've been dealing with IT for the past week or 2, trying to get things. I've lost files. I do not have everything present here with me, but to my recollection, like it was 7.
Okay, so with what happened this year, are you prepared for next year? Because the pool should be open next year. So therefore your payroll is going to be really twice as big. When you really look at it, your problems are what you're saying, are with the parks program and employees there. How are you going to address that for next year?
So I've addressed it too. With Step AmeriCorps, they are not to replace a city employee. They are not to replace it. So that's why we had the equal amount of number of employees compared to a Step AmeriCorps member. This coming year, it will obviously be different, not as many AmeriCorps members. But at the same time, I've learned and I've calculated numbers for our camp manager and our camp leads and our camp counselors to how to better allocate those roles and those standards.
Should there be more training, do you think?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
It was late. We were the last minute bringing people in for some odd reason. Usually in years past, we have trouble finding lifeguards. This year, I had trouble finding anybody to work in general. So it was very last minute, yes. So if nobody got I can't say correct, nobody got all of the training and sit down that we normally do in years past.
Okay. Now, when it came to the expense of going to Loyal Sock Pool,
Yes.
how did that work out? Number one, let's say, how did that work out with the kids going to Loyal Sock? Was that okay? Was that, were there any problems?
There was no issues. The only issue was between myself and Loyal Sock's rec director. We had came to a agreement prior to the season even taking place, before summer kicked off. We had conversations about pricing. And then at the end of the summer, I was issued a completely different fee of what we had discussed. So that was an issue. Absolutely. I would try to resolve it as best as I could. She wasn't trying to budge.
Well,
But
I guess as Judge Judy would say, you had to get it in writing first.
Absolutely.
And that should have been the first thing. Make sure you always get something in writing before you cement a deal with anybody. What was the total cost? Do you know what the total cost is? I lost the files that you sent us. And I know that sounds bizarre, but I could try to open it up this morning again and I couldn't.
Our total cost for swimming was $2,709.
Okay. And how much did RVT charge for the bus? To bus the kids?
100 a bus ride. I was in a different file. So I think it was 3,200, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Something
because there were
close to
some days when
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
that you didn't use the bus. There were some days that there weren't kids that were transported, from what reading everything. Correct. Okay, my next question is the street with the food trucks.
Yes.
It doesn't look like that's a viable promotion at this point. It really doesn't. I mean, I'm trying to do this from memory, so please forgive me. You lost quite a bit of money on the street deal.
Close to $800, yes.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know whether, it's something that isn't viable. I don't know whether it was because of circumstances or anything else, but that's quite a bit, it's a lot of money, especially
Absolutely.
for a special event.
Now, has it lost that kind of money in the past, Kayla? We didn't get any historical data for that festival.
No, like I said, I haven't had all my files prior. I only have finances from 2017 and 2018. In 2017, we we profited almost 2,000, and in 2018, it was only about $250 we profited. 2019, I have no record of that. That is when Jesse left out and Sean came in, so there's no finances for that. But in years prior,
it was a break even or better.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, because I think generally there are events within the city that we think of as potentially as things that might lose the city a small amount of money, but that's worth our while. And then there are things that we think of as they should be net earners, if not break evens. And the street food festival would clearly fit into that description.
Yeah.
How is it then, if we have earned money on it in the years prior that we've conducted it, how is it that we lost so much money this year?
We did not have nowhere near as many food trucks as we've had in the past. A lot of them didn't make it through the pandemic. Other ones proceeded to come, but then a member of their team or their staff received COVID, so they were unfortunately could not come. It was a lack of different events that were going on in the county or surrounding counties. It was Blues Festival. We had to change the date. Then it was the Balloon Festival. So there was multiple events that were advertised way before and as advertised a year prior, that people already knew about prior to us having solidified the date for street food.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Well, it seems like that would be something that we should be looking out for before we settle on the date. Okay. Bonnie, I apologize. I interrupted you.
Oh, no. No, I know. I'm trying
part
to
of what I was
find
curious about was, yeah.
I'm trying to find the rest of my notes and I can't find them.
Yeah.
I had a problem with rec here today, let me tell you.
But did you have anything else that you wanted to?
Not that I can,
Okay.
when I find more, then I'll jump back in.
Sure. Adam, how about you? Anything that you'd like to ask, talk to Kayla about?
No, off the top of my head. The documentation you sent Kayla was helpful. It's just the continuous question of, I guess, how do we manage the investment of recreation in the community? We've done it for a while, and it is an investment between the legacy costs that we associate with it and what have you. That's what it really comes down to. There's some good things that we've done in the past, like the food truck thing, for example. That maybe that's not something we do again. We've learned from that, per se, but nothing really. Liz, a lot of your questions I think that you had sent over to Kayla were a lot of where my head was at as well. So
got it. Well, then I'll kind of move into trying to cover some of that. Yeah. I mean, I guess, Kayla, I was curious to return to the whole labor issue for a minute. Can you explain to me, are you saying that we were overstaffed in the summer parks program as a result of hiring those AmeriCorps people?
Yes and no. Yes, due to our number of campers being down. I had so much interest of what there was the city bringing back the summer day camp. Are they going to provide things? Yes. I sent out, I don't know how many applications via email, Facebook, people coming into my office, coming to site and picking up applications. And then those numbers dwindled down. We normally average between 50 to 70 kids per camp. We started at 30 and then it went up a little bit. And then we went down to a total of maybe 25 kids total per both camp. And unfortunately, once you hire AmeriCorps, you can obviously cease this, their use in the community, but I'm still left paying for them to be there. So we keep them there, but I still have to have city staff to be there because they can't be unsupervised, so to say. They are not an employee. They are training, they're learning things. They're not to replace us. So then that puts our staff to be there, our actual city employee staff to be there on site. And then it's just a matter of how many kids come up to how many kids I have to have on site that day.
But I'm confused because theoretically, I mean, we budgeted salary wise for a complete parks program, right? That 50 to 75 kids per park. We didn't under budget salaries this past year because we were expecting not to have the right number, not to have the same number of kids.
Right.
So that amount of money should have been enough money, especially given that the AmeriCorps was actually less expensive than the average salary for a recreation program employee, correct?
Correct. It came into individuals' pay. We had a couple people that returned. So as you return, you work with us. Obviously, we give you a 25 or 50 cent raise. Then it came into a gentleman who applied, and myself, the mayor, as well as I think a couple other people had approved this gentleman and approved him for a certain amount. And because of his qualifications and the certificates he came along with, and then the people that were staffed here previously, and this being his first year, were told how much he was paid. It wasn't fair for their rate compared to him first coming in, and this being their third year coming back. So then we had to change pay rates for people.
That's
So
poor
what would-
business practice. That's really a poor
Yeah, I was
business
gonna say.
practice.
Yeah, that just sounds like a major snafu to me on the part of the administration. What you're telling me is that we hired someone who was more qualified than some of the people who've been working with us for a couple of years, correct?
Correct.
And consequently, we hired him at a higher rate than we were paying them. It sounds as though we either should not have offered him the amount of money we offered him because it was unfair to the other employees who had served us for longer, or we should have told them, especially given our staffing situation, that we didn't, that we couldn't afford to provide them with the same amount of money because they didn't have the same qualifications.
Understand.
We can't, all those decisions are made on, on kind of a business basis, but we're working with taxpayer dollars. We can't simply give away money that isn't budgeted because of a perceived inequity that's not actually an inequity within with the amount of money that we're paying to our employees. I guess what I'm trying to figure out is you're telling me that we were potentially even that we had the right amount of staff for a fully staffed summer program. We had a third of the number of campers that we expected to have, and yet we exceeded the budget by about 20%, correct?
Correct.
We can't afford to increase that budget, especially given that all of our events this year have substantially underperformed in terms of income. So, it would be one thing if we were making it up by making a bunch of money on events that we could then put into salaries in the parks program and in the pools, but that is not a possibility. Because we're losing money on both ends right now is the way that I look at the financial situation in the rec department. And so the city will be subsidizing not only a net loss or a net break even. We would usually expect to see $10,000 to $20,000 worth of income on the event side in the rec department. This year, from the events you sent us details on, it looks as though we're about break even, not 10 to 20,000 plus. And then we've lost about $6,000, or we've gone over budget on the programming by about $6,000. Were the RVT transfers built into our budget? Or
Yes.
Is that also extra? So we built $3,000.
It was built into the budget on the pre-notion of years prior being charged $60 per day. Now this year we were charged $100 per day.
Okay, so no, we built in $2,000, but so that is also $1,200 over budget?
No, a couple hundred. I think it was 3,000 that was budgeted into it.
Okay, got it. All right, that's not that. I'm just trying to wrap my head around how we're going over on all these things. And what previous years we were paying $60 a day to transfer people to Memorial Park. Is that what was going on?
Yes.
Okay. But then in this case, we were paying $100 a day to transfer to Loyal Sock. I'm also just trying to understand basically what it cost us to shut the pool down last year from this perspective, right? Because we looked at, potential savings of what we would have spent to open the pool, but I don't think we looked at the cost, the $2,500 to get admittance to Loyal Sock, as well as the cost of the extra busing required to take students there. So that's an additional cost that we need to consider, depending on what we're looking at with the pools in the future. Anyway, so I don't know where the administrative failure is on this, and I'm not leveling the blame at you, Kayla, since it sounds as though perhaps it was an administration higher up than you, or it was an administrative decision that was higher up than you. But we can't afford to increase the budget for salaries moving forward in the recreation program or in the pools. We need to figure out a way to bring our costs back in line. And if you're telling me that what we did was gave substantial raises to several people who will be returning employees again this year, and who will return at that higher amount that we did not budget for, then that sounds to me like it's created an ongoing problem in the recreation department, not just a one-year problem. Am I correct?
To an extent, yes. A lot of those, the employees that we did have this year, the ones that were hired at that higher rate, only one of them plan on coming back next year. And that's still under consideration as well.
Oh, I think I would suggest that perhaps that's somebody we can't afford. What I'm hearing from you, and it makes sense, you need to have a level of pay equity, based on experience, based on credentials, within an organization. There also, of course, should be a limited amount of discussion in terms of what people are making. There shouldn't be an effort on the part of the administration, of course, to make that information public. But if we have set too high a bar with an individual who's a returning employee and we can't afford to meet that bar, then I think we need to reevaluate all of our pay structure and be honest with that individual if we cannot pay that much moving forward. And that's unfortunate because that means we lose experience within the department. But if we acted in haste and gave a raise where we couldn't afford to, then that's something we need to deal with. That's a discussion for you and the mayor to have, I guess, if that was how you guys decided to move forward. But we're already looking at rising costs within the city. The one place I think where we weren't necessarily anticipating rising costs was in seasonal employees in the rec department. Because we have so many slated increases in compensation just predicated on union contracts, et cetera. Anyway, that's something we need to get sorted out before budget time, obviously.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay. And then what was our profit loss number for Williamsport Welcomes the World?
So for Williamsport Welcomes the World, it's a unique situation. We don't pay any of the expenses. The chamber picks up all expenses. We get all profit. So every vendor fee we don't pay anything out.
Okay.
So we made $2,438 this year.
Okay. And historically speaking, we're moving 2020, obviously.
Usually around 6,000, but because the chambers took over most of the planning and the vendor fees and everything, they slashed those prices in half this year.
Oh, so they wanted to charge less for vendor fees, you're saying, than we have traditionally?
Yeah. So instead of it was $75, it went to $35. Like they cut it in half for vendors. So usually on a normal, when I have control over the whole vendor application and the vendor aspect of it, we always make anywhere from 5,000 upwards. But because chambers took over this year and they controlled the vendor applications and all of the electronic payments and everything, they took it and gave it a discount to be able to get more vendors to come to the event. Because at one point when it first started, we only had 8 people interested in coming. Then it went up to 16. And then when they took it from 2 days to 1 day and cut the price in half, then our vendor application numbers went up.
Okay. Got
Kayla,
it.
is that going to happen next year? Are we, I talked to you previously that this was one of our biggest money makers. And
Yes.
to have the chamber take control over this, I think
wasn't aware that the chambers was taken over until I saw it posted on Facebook.
Okay, and people were able to use their charge cards. Did they take a percentage off of that? Because anytime you use a charge card, there's, you're charged a percentage. Do you know if they did that?
I do not know. The only record I have is how much that was in that account that they sent a check to us.
I think we have to know if there was, if they took a piece of that to pay for the uses of a charge card.
Okay.
And as you can also see, reducing the rate of a vendor did not really do any good for getting more vendors also.
Correct.
So I think the whole thing was a bad move all the way around. Did they also pick up the cost of what streets and parks
Yes,
puts
they
in their
covered
budget?
the cost of everything.
And the police department, the whole, everything?
Yes.
See, this is like losing control of this.
Yes. So in years past, because like I said, I've been around for a while. The recreation always has handled everything vendor related to Williamsport Welcomes the World. The chambers picks up all the expenses. So trash, police, streets and parks, all of these expenses chamber pays for, but we were always in control of everything that had to do with vendors. This year, I don't know how, I don't know where, I don't know who, somehow or another it switched over to the chambers and they took control over pretty much everything. I was just there to help with the vendors because I was most familiar with them.
So, I mean, have we had this discussion within,
Yeah.
That would have been a combination of an administrative decision and a chamber decision. The chamber couldn't unilaterally decide to take over the event. So someone within the administration must have told them that they should.
I would assume that, but I wasn't a part of any of those conversations.
Okay. The reason that I'm asking is if that's the way that we're going to do it moving forward, then perhaps we should simply sign over the entire process to them.
Right.
And remove the city's involvement. But that's a decision that needs to be made by the administration in cooperation with the chamber, I guess. It sounds as though the chamber may have been making good decisions for a post-pandemic year. That is to say, they got a better crowd by slashing fees and and I think putting together a good event immediately post-pandemic is probably essential to the long-term survival of the event. Mm-hmm. So that may not have been a bad idea. I don't know. And I think that's a lot of the question with all of these different events that we hosted this year, is how do we improve the marketability and not necessarily the profitability, but the sustainability of the event next year, right? How do we make it something the city can afford to continue doing? How do we make it a net win for us? And part of figuring that out is right. What standards have we had in the past? To what extent do those standards still apply post-pandemic? Do we need to cut vendor fees,
right.
in order to make the event successful so that in the long term we get more vendors, right?
So all my other events,
so how do we solicit sponsorships?
Right.
So that we're still having a break-even event. Was there a reason why we weren't looking for sponsorships this year?
No, trust me, I looked high and I looked far. I reached out. I went and spoke to people, sat down individually with people, emails, phone calls, everything I could. Nobody was willing to have that. It was always the same response. I'll get back to you. I follow up and they're like, we just don't have it. Other people I never got a response in general. I don't know if it's because every business was the same thing. Everybody's coming off that COVID year and trying to sustain for themselves that they didn't have what they usually have to give as a sponsorship or as a donation.
Yeah. I think there's certainly some truth to that. I do think there's also, you've reached out for sponsorships. You've been in charge of sponsorships before this year, correct? That is to say, the reason that I'm asking is that there are more effective ways to get sponsorships and less effective ways to get sponsorships, but you've done it in the past and received sponsorships and this year you didn't? Or was it someone else who was doing it in the past and then this year?
In the past it was myself and Jesse, and this year it's obviously just myself.
Right.
But I've definitely reached out. I have a list. I reached out to every business on my list and then some. I didn't get any responses.
Got it. Because as a business owner, I'm more likely to respond affirmatively if somebody actually calls and talks to me than if someone sends me a Facebook message. You know what I mean?
Right.
But if it was a technique that we'd used in the past and it worked, and now it didn't work this year, then that's, you know what I mean? That I write off to pandemic woes. For the record though, and this may also be true of Ms. Katz, though I can't speak for her, you know, I at least as an individual, if not as a business, I'd be happy to sponsor some city events, Kayla. If you reach out to council, I think you'll find that in general. It might not be a lot of money, but it's something.
Absolutely. Any little bit of help.
Yeah, I saw my name on the list for one of the Easter egg hunts, and I was like, oh, I did give money to that. Anyway, if you ask me, I'll probably do it again.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay, because I you know, it looks to me both like we're going to need to figure out new, you know, that our old strategies might not be as effective after the pandemic as they were before. And so part of the job of the recreation department in these slow months here is figuring out, you know, a better return on investment for sponsors, something like that. You know what I mean? Maybe putting together a package that we haven't in the past to try and incentivize sponsorship for city events. And I'm sure that, you know, council can try to advise on that a bit, but if this is the slow season, then this is when we have time to work on it. And we need to figure it out, because I don't think that we can do, you know, we expected lost revenue in 2021, but we need to try and right that ship by 2022 so that city events are running at a positive, and we can afford to provide the recreation services that those events help subsidize.
Liz, I would like to touch again on Williamsport Welcomes the World.
Please, Bonnie. Sorry, I jumped in there.
It's, you know, I just find it amazing that the chamber would have taken over. Mayor, were you aware of this happening?
Yeah, so Jason and myself and others, we had discussions on how to, obviously went back and forth with what Little League was doing. You know, initially they were going to have a limited crowd, and then they weren't, you know, and then it was only US. So as what, you know, the discussion went a little bit ago was to how do we maximize Williamsport Welcomes the World? We started with 2 days, then we went to 1 day. Do we want to do Friday? Do we want to do Saturday? Ultimately, this is where we landed. We had numerous meetings up at RVT where we were discussing, you know, what's the best possible outcome given the circumstances. And next year it might look different. Who knows? If, you know, it wasn't truly a Welcomes the World this year, obviously, when it was just United States. So, you know, working with Jason, maybe it does look different moving forward. We go back to the original way, quote unquote. You know, Jason and I have spoke about this, the chamber, to see next year if it's truly, you know, the 75th anniversary of Little League's coming up. The Little League Congress is coming to Williamsport. And so there's a lot of moving parts for next year, and maybe we get back to the way it used to look. For this year, we thought this was the best avenue, given still that we were under obviously constraints. Little League went from, you know, the limited attendance to even more limited, which obviously that's out of our control. So that's why I think personally that it was down. Obviously the pandemic and the vendors, but then when the vendors got word that there were going to be even less attendance, you know, we just didn't have the turnout that we generally do. So, you know, that's what we decided to do. But next year, like I said, maybe it is back to, I mean, obviously we're all hopeful that it's back to a full World Series, the parade, a true Williamsport Welcomes the World, with the parade, the vendors, and everything is back, say the normal, quote unquote, with the Little League World Series and all the events that surround it. So, you know, obviously this is very fluid, you know, as Little League works through next year. And of course, even at the last minute this year with the Delta variant kicking up, that changed the plans just before Williamsport Welcomes the World, basically. So, you know, we're all fingers crossed and hopeful that next year it's not.
Well, I'd like to address why Williamsport Welcomes the World came to fruition. It was done because none of the businesses in Williamsport benefited really from the Little League World Series. So everybody came up with an idea of let's have this block party to help the businesses to bring people downtown. But it was also in conjunction with making sure that everything that was done with Williamsport Welcomes the World was kid friendly, kids games for kids, giveaways for kids. We went out of our way for the first, I don't know how many years, to make sure that companies would be giving things away for the kids, that it was a lot of fun. And I think it's lost its translation in the last couple of years, where it became more of a moneymaker instead of what it was the purpose. The purpose was for the kids to have fun, to have great games. The chamber helped tremendously. I mean, it really was hand in hand with the chamber to do this, to make it really successful. But we have to bring it back to where it was, what the full meaning of Williamsport Welcome the World was, to help the businesses and make sure things are done for kids. And this is where I would like to see it, go back to.
Yeah, and I agree. I think we all want to see it go back to that, and hopefully we can get through all of the pandemic and related restrictions next year, and it can get back to that where there's tons of kids activities. Like I said, we have the parade, we have all of the vendors, everyone feels comfortable, and everyone's out and about enjoying Williamsport Welcomes the World and the Little League World Series. We have the whole world, and we have all of the folks that travel here from all around the country and all around the world enjoying Williamsport, and that it's a big, wonderful event as it's been in years past, and not like 2020 and 2021. I think we all are in agreement, and I would agree with you on that hopefully we can get back to that for 2022. And that's what Chamber and the city have always worked hand in hand, which is what we did this year. It looked a little bit different, obviously, but things still look different. But hopefully next year we'll continue to work with the chamber hand in hand and get back to the way it was, 2019 and before, where it's just a packed house.
Thank you. And I do have one other thing for Kayla. Kayla, as the council member, we get questions from the public constantly. And, I was asked about the Christmas parade, when we were going to have that, and Brandon Park festivities. I would appreciate it, and I think other council people would also, is if you could email us the events that you've come up with, the dates and times, that we don't have to find this on Facebook, because then we look like we're not informed. So I would really appreciate that. And I think, like I said, other council people would also.
Absolutely.
All right. Yeah, I think, we've struggled with this my entire time on council. And it remains true that there is a limited amount of communication, I think, on certain kind of basic stuff like that between the administration and council. It's nobody's fault, but maybe there's Mr. Black, this might be a question for you. Maybe there's a technological means that we can by which we can kind of share basic information like this, things that the city's working on, dates that we're setting for certain special events, changes to restrictions or locations of city offices right now, all that stuff, so that when members of council get asked these questions, which we should know the answers to, but ideally we would know them through a pipeline other than the same means that the public has to find them out, right? And I'm not quite sure what that means is, but I would agree with Bonnie that it feels like sometimes, especially right now when there aren't when we're not meeting in person, we're meeting mostly via Zoom. We're not managing to glean that information, from another source prior to finding it in the public eye. Is that about what you were saying, Bonnie?
That's it.
Yeah.
How many times do you get asked?
Yeah. Well, I know people are always saying, so what time is when's leaf pickup? And I'm like, huh.
Exactly.
Right.
Can I say that for recreation, we do have one of your council members that sits on the recreation commission board. And so my assumption in years prior, that person took that information to council so that everybody was aware. But from moving forward on, I will just email the same agenda that I would give that person to council as well.
I think
Kayla.
I think that would be fine. in some ways, I guess, to the point that we were discussing earlier about the whole, like, a bunch of randomly titled emails and randomly titled attachments that Adam was saying. Sometimes there's sort of this vast quantity of email and you're never quite sure whether, this item applies to you, or how to look for it if you've missed it the first time, you know what I mean? How to go back and track down information about recreation events or something. So it might be that we could come up with a better system so that it was easier to identify and find that information for everyone. But for right now, it is what we're doing. Anyway, Kayla, thank you very much for waiting around for us to get around to discussing recreation expenses. I am sorry that we kept it waiting this long on this.
No worries.
But we appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing the administration's, and your plans, and then the larger kind of administrative plans, I guess, for the rec department in the 2022 year. Have we resolved the issues with the pool? We're looking to opening up the pool here in 2022.
Yes, it's currently out to bid right now for a pool liner,
Okay.
called a pool membrane, but the pool liner, which would alleviate a lot of our issues that we had prior.
Okay, great. All right, sounds perfect. Then, okay. Adam, Bonnie, any other questions on this?
Nope.
All right.
No.
Okay, then let's move on. Adam, if it's okay with you, could I postpone item number 2 till a little further toward the end of the meeting?
Whatever works for you.
Okay, just so that maybe we can get some of the folks who might be able to step out before then. All
Certainly.
right. Okay, so Mr. Winder, your item is quick and easy. A resolution awarding trash removal for years 2022, 2023, and 2024 for the city of Williamsport.
Afternoon, this resolution is to approve the trash removal for 2022, 2023, 2024. We only had one bidder. It was Bauer Disposal. The total cost for all 3 years will be $75,596.04. The increase was very minor compared to last year and the year before. It's basically the same thing we've been going through for a very long time. And I'll answer any questions you may have.
Okay, Bonnie, Adam.
Can't believe nobody wants to pick up our trash.
I can't believe anybody wants to pick up our trash. It still floors me that there are people out there willing to do this.
Seriously. I have no questions.
This is for a living most of the time.
It's a necessary thing.
Yep. I don't have any questions either.
Okay. The only question I have, Mr. Winder, is why are you bringing this item and not the head of streets and parks?
Only because I put it out to bid and did the bid opening. He is actually here with me.
Okay.
So this was just the first one for me to walk him through.
Okay, good. Hello. Sorry, I was looking at my email, reviewing the agenda and everything. I didn't notice that you had company there. Okay, good. Yeah, I was just hoping that this was sort of a training operation. So excellent. All right, I'm pleased to hear that it is. Okay, no further questions. Bonnie or Adam, if there are no other questions from anyone else out there, I'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion. We forward to the full body council with a positive recommendation.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, excellent. All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Winder. That one was quick and easy.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, wait, before he goes, when is leaf pickup?
Oh, yeah, actually.
Leaf pickup started last week, and as always, it will go through to the first plowable snowfall.
Okay. Mr. Winder, is there a schedule for when we're picking up in certain areas that the city could make available?
We can attempt to. This is our first year of having 3 machines, so we're not exactly sure how fast we'll go through each area now.
Okay. The only reason I'm asking is that, the weather in the autumn being what it is, it's kind of pointless to rake your leaves if somebody's not going to come around and pick them up, the next day, say. So I think all of us wind up in this position of not knowing when we should put everything out to the curb to minimize the chance that it just blows right back onto the lawn.
Yep, Scott is making a note right now, and we'll try to compile a schedule and put it out for everybody.
That'd be awesome. All right. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. Next up, let's move on to item number 5, a resolution authorizing the purchase of Motorola police service radios and related equipment through Keystone Communications. Mr. Snyder, Chief Snyder, excuse me.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Hello.
Just want to bring a resolution authorizing the purchase of 67 APX 8000 series radios and 24 APX 4500 enhanced radios and related equipment from Motorola Solutions through Keystone Communications. The total cost would be $470,361.29. This allocation would come from the American Rescue Plans, our American Rescue Plan Act funds. To do a little bit of a breakdown, there's 67 portable or handheld radios. The way we broke those down is 47 portable handheld radios for the Patrol Division, WPP officers, 15 portable handheld radios issued to SRT personnel, and then 5 additional spare radios. In addition with that, you have the mobile radios, which would be 24, which those would be the ones that are in the vehicles. So we'd have 22 mobile radios for police fleet vehicles, 1 mobile radio for SRT truck, and then 1 mobile radio for the SRT armored truck. To give a little bit of a cost breakdown, for 67 portable and handheld radio, or 4 handheld radios, you're looking at a cost of $312,989.56. For the 24 mobile or vehicle contained radios, you're looking at $93,749.64. And then for related equipment, which would include battery, software, installation, and things as such, would be about $63,622.09. I did attach for you guys to look at an itemized invoice that breaks everything down. And the purchase would be through Keystone, which I provided a CoStarz contract as well. So they meet all the requirements there, and that's been reviewed by our solicitor. So I'm open for any questions that you may have.
Okay, sounds good. Bonnie, Adam, what do you guys want to lead it off?
Yeah, sure. Just a couple comments. I appreciate the CoStarz thing, Chief. I don't know how much we've done this in the past, or I feel like I've brought it up before. I may not have, though. We can also use the federal government's GSA schedule, unless that's changed recently. From my experience, school districts, municipal government, county government are able to do that as well. I don't know if we looked at that avenue versus CoStarz, just to maybe make things go a little bit further. I don't know if it's a super big deal on this one, but in general, moving forward, that would be a good practice to do as well. It's a similar mechanism if you're not familiar with it. Just implemented and developed by the federal government versus this being a state one specifically. Might be good for us to look at for other things down the road. So I wanted to throw that out there. And then the only other comment that I would make, I certainly won't speak for Mrs. Katz and Mrs. Mealy, but I think we're of the same opinion and page. This is definitely a need. I think we all get that. I know in the past, I've at least, asked for, let's look at grants, let's look at other things, because I think we've been talking about this for a couple of years now in my tenure, and I don't think that there's really much out there at the moment. I would feel more comfortable allocating this money when we have a agreed upon plan for everything. I identified projects, identified streams we want to put this to, a finalized strategy with a budget put together, et cetera, before signing off on this particularly. Again, I get the need. I don't think we really probably have many options to fill this need. But I mean, this is a good chunk of that $25 million that we have. I think that would be a responsible path to take for sure when we're talking about allocating money of the sums out of that rescue plan funding. Those are really the only general comments that I have. I'll defer to my other two colleagues here on the Finance Committee.
Sure. Bonnie, did you have anything to add to that?
Yes, I think when we first received notification that we were getting the ARPA funds, the things that we've discussed over the last couple of months was that we wanted a plan in place before we started spending the money, because it's so easy to say, okay, let's pull money out of here for this, let's do it for that. You know, if you don't have it on paper, if you don't have a plan, you might waste the time and energy. Does that make sense? You know, I just, you know, it's like anything else. We're budgeting what we have, and we're really thrilled that we have this money available. But I would rather have us have the plan in place and say, okay, we're going to spend $500,000 for the radio, the guns. What are we doing? Yeah. And it's, you know, and I think that's what we've all discussed in the past, that this is what we were doing. And it's a need. This is a need. We need the radios because we know that the dead spots, we know so many other things that are problems with the radios. And I know the chief would like to get this on board as soon as possible, because it could be a safety problem for our officers, which of course we never want to have. And I think it's up to the administration and council to sit down and let's get our plan in place immediately, so we can start doing things that are needed for the city. And this is one of our biggest things right now is the safety of our police officers. So my opinion is, let's get the plan, let's sit down and have a meeting, and let's get this on paper before we say what we're going to do with this money.
I'm not sure what plan you're talking about. I did put a plan together, and I have reached out to discuss it. One of the issues is I'm kind of picking up the pieces here of something that was neglected, because yes, you are absolutely right. There should be a plan in place. And actually, what I would have recommended is a cyclic plan where you could do a little bit and piece it over a period of years, but that wasn't done. I can't do anything about what happened in the past. I'm just dealing with what I have now. We're kind of getting ourselves in a predicament now where we're not going to have communication ability in a couple of years. That's not nothing. I'm not just throwing it out there. That's something that's come down from a federal mandate. We failed in the past we were notified in 2013 that this was coming and nothing was ever done. So yes, you're absolutely right. This should have been a cyclic plan, and that's what I would have done, provided I was in that position at that time. But here I am inheriting this now, and it's only been a half year if that, and we have to move on. So when I brought this up to you and before, when we talked about the distribution of the rescue funds, and everybody was good with it. It is a big purchase, but it's one that's necessary, and it's one that's going to have to happen, or we're not going to be able to communicate. So I have a plan in place with what I want to do, but like I said, we're kind of at a point now where we have to act.
Well, Chief, I've heard this for you're right. It's like so many other things it gets kicked down the road, and this has been important for the last couple of years. And it's bothersome that, things are not put into, the priorities are not there. And I think that's what's bothersome. I think what I'm saying right now is I want to make sure that the ARPA money that plan is in place. Okay. I know what you're doing, and I understand what you're saying. Your plan is, because you have a lot of things that are falling apart right now between the police cars and the radios and so on and so forth. And so it's, we have to look at where we're going to go with everything also. So I'm saying that, let's get the ARPA money, let's get that plan on paper as soon as possible so the chief can get these radios. And I do have a question for Joe Pavlak. Joe, are you there? Joe P?
Yeah.
Oh God, is he awake?
Oh, I'm sorry. I might.
What's the matter?
My throat's
This is the
sore.
reason we don't have public meetings.
Oh my goodness
Or
gracious!
we don't have in-person meetings right now.
Lord.
Sorry.
I just want to ask, where's the CoStar's $500 fee coming out of? What line item? Do you know?
That's paid by the vendor. They pay the fee to become a CoStar member and to be on the
Okay.
CoStar list.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that. Okay, thank you, Joe. I'm finished, Liz.
Thanks, Bonnie. Chief Snyder, none of these comments I don't believe are related to performance on the part of the police administration, although I think you've made the case both just now and over the last couple of weeks for possibly underperformance or performance in the wrong direction on the part of previous police administrations. And that's unfortunately kind of the rhetoric we seem to be hearing all over the place right now within city government. But this in particular, I think what we're saying is while it would be great to receive a grant for a portion of the radios, we understand we need to move on the item now. And I think by and large, in the discussions that we've had, the handful of public discussions that we've had on use of ARPA funding, we've all been in agreement that police radios would be a part of the use of that ARPA funding. What the Finance Committee is saying is we also agreed that we weren't going to expend any ARPA funding until we had a plan for what we were doing with it. Not just the radios, but in general. And we don't need to have a plan for all $25 million. But I think we need to say we're getting 12 million next year. These are the items that we know that we will be utilizing that 12 million for. Part of the reason that I am going to insist on that before I will back any expenditure of ARPA funding is that I am nervous that we will misspend the funds. And not necessarily on radios. That's not, this is a larger conversation that I'm having. I'm not having a conversation just about police radios right now. I am nervous that we will authorize expenditures that if we move willy-nilly to spend ARPA funding on things that we need, that we will authorize expenditures that will turn out not to be a viable use of ARPA funds, and we'll get ourselves in a pickle. So what I am going to insist that the administration and council do before we authorize any expenditures of ARPA funding, before I authorize any expenditures or ARPA funding, excuse me, I can't speak for other members of council, but what I will need to see before I'm willing to authorize any budgetary items that spend ARPA money is a plan, and then that plan, for my peace of mind, would need to be signed off on by an independent consultant of the city that indicates someone with expertise in the legal and legitimate uses of American Rescue Plan Act funding. And then also I would like to see the city solicitor agree that these uses that the city is planning to put the money to are legitimate expenditures of American Rescue Plan Act funding. And if necessary, I would need to understand whether or not it would be wise for us to incorporate specific wording that ties them to one or the other element of one element or another of potential uses for American Rescue Plan Act funding. So this is not a commentary on the need for police radios. This is not a commentary on the particular plan that you've put in place, which looks to me to be good, Chief Snyder. This is me saying that council has been pushing for us to designate a set series of expenditures of American Rescue Plan Act funds, to set those aside for the administration and council to meet and come to an agreement that these are things that all of us consider important and necessary uses of the funding. And then, for that to be a document, a working document, perhaps, that we modify as we decide on uses for remaining elements of funding, but for that to be a document that is in existence, that is part of the public record. And then we move forward with authorizing these individual expenditures. Bonnie and Adam, did I miss anything there that you think would be important to say?
No, I mean, I think you covered it well. And I mean, I would even take it a step further. I mean, we've run into a couple other times where, we've been proposed to use this funding for other items, and we've, to this point, deemed them not an appropriate use of this money. This is the first one that I think we generally agree is an appropriate use for sure. But I also don't want to go down that slope of, there's a difference between urgent and important. And, emergencies happen, but, not everything's not necessarily an emergency. I mean, this is very, very important for sure. And I think the safety of our police officers is an emergency. We're going to talk about that with the police cars too. But I want to make sure that I don't want to go down the road of opening those floodgates of, using this for every emergency and then some, because there's certainly other avenues we can use for items that aren't as critical as this. That's the secondary thing for me. And Liz, to your point of having verification we can do this, the administration has already started that, which is good to see. We have an email from, I think, Keller, that came through earlier today, that this is appropriate. So we're on the right track there, which is great to see, and I'm happy to see that. So I would thank the administration for verifying that with this expense. But I agree. I think that process is also best done with an entirety of a plan. So Liz, you summed it up well.
Yeah, I think we need a more comprehensive plan. And I think not only is council willing to participate in making that plan, we want to participate in making that plan, but we need to get together with the administration, I think, and actually get a series of items in writing. We've discussed, I think, at the last meeting we had about ARPA funding, it was at least $10 million of items that we could allocate that we wanted to spend funding on. So let's go ahead, get that in writing, get concurrence from both council and the administration that those are items that we intend to spend ARPA funding on. And that lets us know that we can then move forward with letting those contracts, with getting those items in the pipeline.
Yeah. And sorry to cut you off, Liz.
Sure.
I'm hopeful that we're close. I mean, we've had 2 work sessions where I think we've all threw out a number of substantial and fruitful ideas of where everybody's individual and maybe collective priorities lie, this being one of them. I think we're close. I don't think this is going to take years at all. I mean, if it does, we've got bigger issues. We should be able to do that, I think, rather expediently here as we close the year. So I don't think we're far off. And I think given that adds to my comfort level of delaying a little bit on this yet. So.
Okay.
I concur with both you, Adam and Liz. And let's get another meeting going that we can start allocating what's really necessary for our city.
Yeah. I mean, and let me underline, I don't think that, while I think that the public meeting process is extremely important, it might be more valuable for some members of council, some members of the administration to sit down, outline a document, and then have a public meeting to discuss the parameters of that document more fully. That is to say, it's not always easy to put something like that together in a public meeting, but I think that we need that document, and then we need approval of that document in a public setting and discussion of that document in a public setting. And I think right, you're correct, Adam, that we could make that happen at any point. We just need to make that happen before we begin authorizing expenditures.
Liz, John Mackey has his hand raised.
Oh, Mr. Mackey, I apologize once again. I'm looking at documents instead of watching the meeting here. John?
That's okay. Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's any secret that these type of things are near and dear to my heart. I would like to think that we can do both things at once. We should be able to spend some of the, and I'm going to say this kind of as a joke, but at some point we are going to have to spend some of this money. And we should be able to do both, right? I think we're all aware that we are in charge of these floodgates that I keep hearing about, right? And we control those floodgates. Yes. So just because we say yes to this does not mean that we can't close those floodgates again and say no to something else. Right. And I'm going to ask this question knowing the answer already. How many people here on the finance committee have ever been in a foot pursuit with and have a radio not work, right? And I already know the answer to that question. None of you have any idea what that's like. I know what that's like. We are talking about human lives here. And I hate this. I'm getting up on my soapbox now, and I hate to sound, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm being a little theatrical here, but it's the truth. We're talking about human lives, right? We're talking about, okay, we think this is a legitimate use. We agree we all need these radios, but let's just hold off a little bit longer till we can get a plan in place. Well, when's that going to happen? Right? And the whole time this plan is being put in place, our police officers are out there protecting the community with equipment that is completely outdated. And a lot of times, and Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, doesn't work so well. So the idea that we're all saying here saying, we think this is a good idea, but let's just hold off a little bit. It's a little insulting to me as a former police officer, and I have to think that it's insulting to the administration sitting here and to any police officer that might be listening to this meeting. It really is, and I hate to say that. And the bottom line is, I get it. We want to be very careful with this money, and there's lots of ideas out there: splash pads, baseball fields, bike lanes. All right, these are all things that aren't immediately necessary. And yes, we need to have a plan in place, and we don't want to spend this money willy-nilly. But if we're all sitting here today saying, we've known the police need new radios for 2 years, but you know what? We're going to hold off just a little bit longer because we want to see it all in writing in a nice, neat plan. Well, that's not really how life works sometimes. And I understand, like, we've only had 2 ARPA meetings. The last one was what, almost 2 months ago at this point. This is something that just can't wait. And we should be able to do 2 things at the same time. We should be able to say, okay, we've got this money. We all think it's a good use of this money. We've got the mayor who has gotten, what I can tell, Keller to sign off on, saying, yes, this is a legitimate use for this money. But okay, so what are we waiting for? We're waiting for a plan. The whole thing to me, it doesn't feel right.
If I could chime in, a follow-up to that. After our last ARPA work session, I think we were planning to schedule one strictly focus on community development. That was sort of the last piece. I have the full plan ready to go based off, it's obviously a draft right now pending the community and economic development discussion. But I have that all ready to go, and I can send that out to council later this afternoon once our meetings have concluded. But we did, at the last public working session related to the ARPA funds, say $1 million for public safety. So we have that in there of $1 million. We talked about the radios and the records management system. And, with council and administration decided as a draft tentatively for the $1 million of public safety. So listening to the finance committee and what Councilman Mackey just said, I have, I can send out what we have discussed so far, which was public works, public safety, recreation, and a little bit of the financial software. But the big 3 so far were public works, public safety, and recreation, with wanting to dedicate 1 meeting solely to community economic development, which at the initial meeting, I believe we talked about $1 to $2 million for community economic development. So at this point, I can send that out. I'm happy to send that out later this afternoon. I have it right here in front of me. I'm looking at it right now based off our first 2 public working sessions. So I will get that out just directly. But I just want to chime in on that, let you know that we did initially say $1 million. And as Councilman Yoder pointed out, Mr. Keller, Tom Keller from Keller Associates, did send up, just to make sure we were good with this, he did send documentation noting this is eligible expense.
Good. So it sounds to me, Derek, like what we need then is I mean, when I'm talking about a document that proposes specific uses of the funding, I'm not talking about $1 million for public safety. I'm talking about a document that says we're putting, we're allocating up to $500,000 for radios. We're allocating up to $250,000 for X. We're allocating, you know what I mean?
Yep, yes.
To me, that blanket $1 million for public safety is not the level of detail that we need, right?
I agree. Yes,
right.
and I have it, the notes from the first two. So that's how I have it, 400,000 for radios,
Right.
Whatever we discussed, I have that and I can send that out.
Right.
1.4 million in the home program, et cetera, 700,000 for the cross pipes. I mean, I have it broken down. I can send that out. I have the total and then the breakdowns so I can get that out. So I agree with you, Liz, on
So
that. So I can send it out.
Great. I think what we're asking then is right, that you send that out and then we schedule, and it can happen quickly, another, a meeting of the administration and council. I mean, we can have back and forth via email, et cetera, but a meeting of the administration and council so that all of us can basically say, okay, these are the items that we agree are the first rash of ARPA spending. This is what we understand we're moving forward on. Austin White has looked at this and said, that these are all viable products. So has Tom Keller, or so has eConsult, whoever we choose. And we have in writing from both of those entities that these are viable expenditures, so that we've got kind of a double security layer that we're A-okay.
Probably even triple because Delta was there as well. So probably triple.
Yeah, great. However we do it, to me, the more people we can have saying we're good to go, the better. But I mean, we don't need 20 different agencies to sign off. I'm going to be okay if we just have 2 people.
And
Sorry.
and the other thing, I don't know that we've talked much about this, but this is extremely important when it comes to this money specifically, is the back end of it, the compliance and reporting aspect of it. I mean, we need to make sure that we get that right also. I mean, Mayor, I don't know what's in there. We'll take a look at it. And we just need to make sure that we're all on the same page for that aspect as well, because I think to Liz's point, I mean, that's getting that right, I think is what's going to, mitigate a lot of, I think, what Liz is talking about, and which I agree with. And we should just make sure that we understand what we need to do there. I mean, because not having that component adequately in place it's going to make that worse as well. So
the first report was due the end of August, which obviously that was a simple one because we didn't do anything. But yes, you're right. On the back end, just to, there's some discussion whether to split the ARPA money into different accounts for to gain the entrance. I was in favor of just keeping it all together for right now. Moving forward, but I agree to make sure we're obviously clearly in compliance with the reporting. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So we've been looking at these ARPA funding meetings scheduled for Thursdays when we don't have council meetings. So we could potentially look at one as soon as next Thursday, I suppose, if that worked for everyone. I don't know how comfortable everybody would be with that, but I'm not interested in slowing the process down in the slightest. I just am interested in us sticking to the process that we initially identified, because I think that was an important thing that we laid out, that we make a plan for the funding and we spend the funding according to that plan, rather than us spending the funding and then adapting the plan to fit those expenditures. And while I agree with Mr. Mackey's perspective that one little slip doesn't necessarily kill the whole thing, in my experience in city government, as well as in other areas of my life, the minute you make one exception, it is infinitely easier to make the second, and you've established a precedent that makes it harder to say no to future exceptions. And so, given that, undoubtedly, or I believe, although I'm not recalling the specific language in this agreement, but I would assume that this pricing is valid for a short period of time at the bare minimum. So we're not going to lose this opportunity with the radios if we wait and go through this process that we've outlined, especially if the administration already has the document in hand with the items that we've discussed so far. Then I think that we should simply try to fast track a process that allocates at least a certain percentage of the money and gets approval for those allocations and then go from there. I don't know how the other members of the finance committee feel, but that's how I'll be voting today.
Just a FYI, for next Thursday, that's Veterans Day, so probably don't want to do the 11th.
That's
But soon, I'm in agreement to have it.
depends on your
Yeah,
page.
I know. I'm in agreement to have it soon, whenever council is, you know.
Okay. Well, the one after that, Derek, is Thanksgiving.
Right, exactly. So maybe we look at a different day, Thursday,
Yeah,
but I'll defer to
if that's
council.
what we'd like to do, we could look at a Wednesday at 7:30 or something like that, if that worked out better. I do think we need to, create that document, at least have, it doesn't need to be a long public session necessarily, maybe just a public session to say this is what we've agreed is our first, our first round of utilization of these funds, and then we're done. But okay.
I would just point out that all exceptions are not equal, and this is exactly what I'm talking about. Now, here we are, we're working our way into December. So this is yet one more month that we're basically saying to our police officers, we know you need new radios, but let's make sure that everything is specifically spelled out on paper. And we're going to make you use subpar equipment for another month. So
I'm saying to the administration, John, that we had agreed that we were going to finalize this process, and that the administration then needs to follow up and schedule these meetings if they want to begin expending these funds. I'm saying that we had set up this arrangement before this was even an element of discussion.
well, arrangements are made.
I'm saying-
Arrangements are made to be altered, right?
I understand that, but I am saying that this is important to me. The administration knew what had to happen before we authorized any expenditures of these funds. Okay, and so now the administration, if you want me to be a jerk about it, can figure out the meeting time that will work for us so that we can make this happen expediently. Okay, that is my personal take on it. I will defer to other members of the finance committee and to other members of council, of course, about this on Thursday. But I am not trying to be unreasonable, but I am trying to say we all understood that this was the way that we wanted to make this work. And so it is the responsibility of all the parties who came to that agreement to make certain that that is how it works.
And I hate to keep beating this horse, but so aside from what we have in front of us now, Liz, what else do you need to see to say, yes, let's get the police some new radios?
I'm looking forward to seeing the outline that Derek says he has in front of him that he'll be sending to us. And I'm looking forward to a meeting where council and the administration agree that the projects in that outline are projects that we all are comfortable funding. I'm looking forward to indications from Keller and Associates or Delta, as well as the city solicitor, that all of those projects are viable expenditures of funds, or at least that certain of those projects are viable expenditures and that they need time to vet the others so that we understand where our list of projects stands. And that, to my way of thinking, John, could happen within the next week if we schedule a meeting to discuss ARPA funding.
I guess.
And again, sorry, Mayor, and again,
No, good.
this will be the last thing I say. And my overall point is, while this is all happening, our police officers are out there using subpar equipment. And if everyone on the finance committee is okay with that, then I guess that's the way it is. I will, if this comes to a vote on Thursday night, I will vote yes for it. It doesn't sound like we have enough support to get there, but Mayor, you have, I mean, how long would it take to get these type of guarantees from Keller?
Well, and I guess at the last rescue plan working session, we had Keller and Delta and Econ all there. We discussed the radios. We discussed allocating $1 million to public safety. So it should be very quick, and that's why we felt comfortable bringing this, particularly the radios, and obviously not everything we discussed clearly, but the radios, given the urgency, which has been discussed just a little bit ago, that haven't discussed this at a public working session. and having Keller sign off on it, and Delta and e-consults at that session that it's eligible use. I thought we were okay to move this forward, and this is why we brought this specific item to council, given the public safety aspect of it. I can send out the rest of it, obviously, like I said, and get that all out. That can go out right now and have Keller and Delta and e-consult and the solicitor, because it's all stuff so far that we have discussed, and essentially they signed off on it at the last public working session when we had, a number of discussions around each one of those items, except for community development, which we talked about at the first one, but not the second public working session. So I can get this out quickly, and Keller's already signed off on this particular item, and I can get the rest of them as well. That's no issue. So obviously I'm flexible. There's 7 council members and just one of me. So I can make just about anything work anytime that works for you all. So basically council, let me know, get together, and we can make it happen.
What I would suggest, Derek, when you reach out with the document later on tonight, send out a couple of suggestions for meeting times. And when we can get the largest number of people will be when the meeting happens. And that way it gets. John, to your point, we've known that police radios were an issue since you got elected a couple of years ago, because I remember discussing it with you after you got elected. I mean, we've known that they were an issue since before then. We've known that this funding was available for the past year, and we have, or not for the past year, but for close. We have multiple times outlined that we wanted a plan for the funding before we started to release the funds. So the fact that that plan hasn't happened, even though it's been several months, and that the administration is coming to us asking for individual allocations out of that funding, says to me rather that there has simply been a failure to follow through on the goals that we set for ourselves. And if that failure lies at the feet of council, that is fine. If it lies at the feet of the administration, that is what it is too. I am merely saying that I think that we can meet the goals that we set for ourselves relatively quickly, relatively nimbly, and that if I don't stick to the stated goals on this item, it will not happen. So I say we get to it and we get it done, rather than letting this one slip. And then when the next one comes up saying, oh, well, we still don't have that plan, but this is really important. So let's just, it's easy enough to do. There is no reason why we haven't done it yet. So let's do it and get it done. Other communities have been spending this funding for months. And there's no reason why Williamsport shouldn't be as well, except for our failure to be able to come through and make a plan for it. So let's just make the plan and get it out of the way. And Chief Snyder, I am sorry that all of this falls on your shoulders as the one to bring the first proposal for the use of ARPA funding. But we will get it taken care of, and we will get you the authorization to get your radios. It is not about that. It is just about us establishing a procedure and sticking to it. And let's just do it and get it done. Okay.
And I can appreciate that very much. Obviously, I want to move on this. I want to get it going. We had an incident today that proved our radios are not working the way they need to be working. I guess my concern is, or what I kind of wish would have happened, is this conversation would have happened at last finance meeting when I brought this up. So we could have got that ball rolling at that time, as opposed to now we got to wait again. So that's all.
So that was our failure then, Chief Snyder, and I apologize. When we have these long meetings, I think sometimes we're not thinking clearly or asking the proper questions on some items. So I apologize for not clarifying that with you 2 weeks ago when you brought it up. But let's get it moving, let's get it done, and let's get these radios purchased, because we've been talking. I remember having conversations about them with Skip Smith, and that was a long time ago. So let's get it taken care of now. All right, Bonnie and Adam, I've been making all these statements as though I know what's going to happen, and in fact, I have absolutely no idea what you two are going to do. I'm looking to you to hear what kind of a recommendation we're sending this to council with. Should we recommend that council table this pending a plan for ARPA funding, or do you guys want to send it with positive recommendation and I'll just be a nay vote?
I'm comfortable tabling it, keeps it on the agenda, keeps our feet to the fire. We'll get this all straightened out, and then and then approve the allocation after we have everything together as we discussed.
Okay. Ms. Katz, how do you feel about that?
I feel the same way. Was that a motion, Adam?
I'll make a motion to forward the full audio council with the recommendation to table.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, sounds good, guys. Then thank you, Mr. Mackey. Thank you for your input. I appreciate the voice of everyone on council, but I think you and I have to agree to disagree on this item. It may just be my contact with administrations over the course of the last 12 years has led me to believe that, and this is not necessarily as true of Mayor Slaughter's administration as it was of previous ones, but that either you stick to your guns from the get-go, or you find you no longer have any guns when you go to stick to them later. So I've become a bit of a stickler for doing what we said we do. But anyway, I thank everybody for the discussion. And we need to move on and keep getting things done here. All right. Chief Snyder, your next item is item number, excuse me, item number 6, and I do not have my agenda up here. Hang on a minute. Okay. Bonnie, can you read off item number 6 for me? Sorry, my agenda disappeared when I was working.
It is resolution resolution authorizing the execution of a lease agreement for purchase of police vehicles.
Okay. Chief Snyder, would you like to speak to this one?
Yes. Looking to bring a resolution to council authorizing execution of a 5-year lease purchase agreement with First National Bank Commercial Leasing for the purchase of 4 2021 Dodge Durangos that are pursuit rated vehicles, and as well as the cost to fit each vehicle, totaling $186,177.80. There's one thing we brought up before about vehicles. All our options were failing of what we could do to purchase the vehicles, so we found another lease to buy option with FNB. FNB Commercial Leasing submitted a proposal consisting of the first payment of the 5 years. That would be $40,689.13 plus $550 documentation fee, and then additional for the additional 4 years of $40,689.13 for each one. Funding for this lease would be allocated from the vehicle lease purchase line item, which is number 2240-78540. So as we brought to you before, the 4 Dodge Durangos, I attached an invoice to the paperwork there and a memorandum. Before them, each one is $36,095 for a total of $145,080 for all 4 Dodge Durangos. And then for the vehicle upfits, each one would be cost $10,274.45. For 4 vehicles, the total would be $41,097.80, not to exceed. And then the total would be for $186,177.80. So attached with that, I did attach the FNB commercial leasing application for approval, and then the invoice for both the outfits and each of the pursuit rated vehicles.
Okay. Thanks, Chief Snyder. Bonnie, Adam, questions?
The only real question, so I mean, so we need these. We kind of hit on that a little bit, I think, last week when we tabled this. You know, the only real question that I have is, so we're going to lease a few cars. If and or when we get to the point where we want to look at applying that throughout the rest of the fleet, are we able to roll this in? I mean, what does that transition look like? Is there any potential barriers? Is there any cost prohibitive things that we may run into? Just what does that look like?
Well, right now, this is an option to buy. So once we lease, we can make the purchase it's a $1 buyout option. We do have other options going with looking at the fleet with Enterprise. it's gonna have to be looked into a little bit more, but from my understanding is there's options for them to buy us out our vehicles and then we can rent those vehicles back. So we do have options, but for now, that's something we have to look at this to make something happen now. To get our vehicles. We've lost another vehicle since our last meeting. So we are in need of vehicles.
Okay.
Being
Okay.
that we were able to use the community development grant, block grant funding. So this was an option that we had to find. We're unable to or find any other sources of funding within our budget with speaking of Mr. Pollock. So this was an option that was brought up. Mr. Winder has actually done this several times before and talked to us about it. So he was able to walk us through it, get us in contact with the representatives of FMB. And right now, this is the best option that we have to bring to the table.
Okay. Did I get that right? Since the initial expense or the first year expense is 40,000 and change, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we have 146 and change budgeted. So we'll come in under budget and can adequately plan for whether it's not only next year's expenditure, but some additional potential expenditures as we flush out the leasing option.
Yes.
Okay, that's all I've got.
Well, to be clear, we're looking at funding these starting in 2022, correct?
Yeah, the first payment wouldn't be until 2020.
Okay, gotcha.
And we don't have
Oh,
anything budgeted this year,
No, not this year. No, ma'am.
right? But it seemed to me that hadn't you come through with a transfer ordinance related to the upfit cost?
We did with the upfit cost. But when we thought we had the grant.
Would we be wise to, that was my only, sorry, Adam, I just jumped in. But in terms of the
You're
final-
fine.
I guess what I'm wondering is there a reason why the administration doesn't want to use those transfers to fund the first year of a lease agreement? And therefore, we're only locked into leasing through 2026? Mr. Pavlak, can you speak to the wisdom of that or the lack of wisdom?
I'll try to speak, but
Yeah, can you speak at all, Joe?
hey, can I?
Can you text one of us and we'll read it out?
Yes.
That's fine if you'd like to. I'm just trying to understand, I guess, given that we might then be looking at needing to make other financial arrangements, whether it be a long-term leasing setup with enterprise or vehicle acquisitions budgeted for the several upcoming years. It seems like it might be wise for us to try and start paying off these leasing costs earlier rather than later. But I'm, obviously not entirely sure where we sit. Okay. Okay. Mr. Pavlak says that he thinks that perhaps those funds that you had allocated from the budget this year can be put in other directions. And that, if we're using a direct quote from Joe Pavlak, there are probably other things, i.e. debt service, et cetera, that we could use them for in this year's budget. So I guess that means 2022 is our wise year then. But let's consider that a bit between now and Thursday, just in case the administration wants to make a proposal to start the debt service payments in 2021 instead of 2020, or the lease payments in 2021 instead of 2022. Because that is going to impact our long-term ability to organize other leases or other vehicle purchases. The one other question I had is the total cost of product and services that we're receiving, that is 186,177, but the total amount that we're paying for those products and services is about 205,000, 206,000. Am I right about that?
Yeah, it's a 2.99% calculated yield.
Okay, got it. So can I ask you for one thing before Thursday, Chief Snyder, just so that all of us have a bit firmer grasp? Generally speaking, when the police administration in the past has submitted a request for vehicle purchases, we get a summary, a document that outlines the fleet and the vehicles that are the year of each vehicle, the make of each vehicle, the condition of the vehicle, whether or not it's in service. Could you provide that to us before Thursday?
Absolutely, we have one. I could provide that.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, we didn't see that. You know, we've had this whole discussion about how many vehicles we have that are out of service, but I don't have anything that I can look at that shows me what they are. So if you could provide that to us, I think we all would just be kind of on the same page then in terms of exactly what the condition of the fleet is and how dire it is.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you. Bonnie and Adam, now that I accidentally took control of the discussion, Adam, would you like to continue your line of questioning?
No, I'm good. Those are my only ones. So I'm okay.
Okay, Bonnie, anything further to add?
You're still getting the vehicles from New York, from what I see, and the leasing company is in Pittston. So the vehicles that you're getting from, they don't have a leasing company. Or is this done because it's going to be leased through Pennsylvania? How did you get the leasing company in Pittston?
Because we use them already, as I said, ma'am. We talked to Mr. Winder. Mr. Winder has done this finance program through them before.
Okay.
Am I hearing, Bonnie, are those the only questions you have?
Yeah, I was just curious. And I think we're all going to be anxious to see where our fleet stands year-wise and everything with the vehicles, because if we're going to go this route, we're going to have to be prepared for other vehicles being leased. And from what I also understand from the chief, some of the vehicles are just not working out completely of what we do have in the fleet already.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's a whole scenario here of, you know, getting our police fleet in check here.
Mhm.
Yeah, but this is how we're trying to fix it, ma'am. This lease program is not the same as the one that we talked to you about before with Enterprise. This is going to help us get back in the game, if you will, and until we can get there. Because right now we're not getting government incentive pricing from Enterprise, which would actually be Ram or the Dodge Durangos yet, and that's why we can't move on that. And being that we're not able to get the other grant that we thought we might have had, this is the option that we are using, since we don't have any money left in our budget to procure those vehicles to get us back kind of in the game, if you will. But we're going to be in a better position, but we're still not going to be in a better position. I like to start putting numbers together. I already did start putting numbers together for 2022 in terms of if we have to make another purchase as such, or, you know, in preparation if Enterprise does not work out right away, but to have some options and some plans in place to try to get us back up to where we need to be.
Okay.
Yeah, I think.
Thank you, Chief.
Yeah, what I'm expecting to see on the vehicle thing at Bonnie is that unfortunately it's our newest vehicles that are the ones that we are needing to replace.
I know, that's the thing that's scary.
Fortunate truth, right? But that's part of the reason that I'm interested to see the whole thing in writing. Anyway, understanding this as an absolute emergency need brought forward by the administration, I think while I'm generally opposed to this sort of a lease option when we can afford to fund purchase directly out of the budget, I'll be comfortable with backing it. As I said, might be even more comfortable if we could find a way that we could utilize funds from this year's budget to cover at least a portion of the cost, so that we weren't basically stealing from Peter to pay Paul, you know, the whole way down. That is to say, getting vehicles this year that we don't even start paying for until 2022. Because that just places the burden of, you know, the financial burden for dealing with the cost of these police vehicles on future councils and future administrations even further than what we've ever done in the past. I would encourage the administration to think about that, just because it's not, it's tying its own hands, I suppose, and sort of the on the financial possibilities for police vehicles in the future. That being said, I'll be supporting this item today for the Finance Committee. Bonnie and Adam, if you haven't got any other comments, and if no one else out there does either, I would take a motion.
I make a motion to pass this on to the full body of council with a positive recommendation.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Liz,
yeah.
quick request. Do you mind if I go? I'm sorry.
No, it's fine.
And honestly, if to save time, I don't have to go today. That's up to you, but I do need to go.
Oh, you need, so, okay.
I have like 5 or 10 minutes.
So you would like to discuss item number 2 here, or you'd like to leave the meeting? Sorry, I wasn't quite certain which way to interpret that.
If you would like to discuss item number 2, the one that I'm sponsoring, I'm happy to do that. I request to do that now.
Let's do it. Let's do it now.
If you don't mind.
No, that's fine. That's perfectly fine. I just, when you said, do you mind if I go? I thought you meant, do you mind if I leave?
No, I do need to go soon, but
okay.
No,
All right.
I would prefer to do this. Yeah, that's fine.
Got it. So next item on the agenda is item number 2, an ordinance amending part 1 of the codified ordinances of the city of Williamsport. Mr. Yoder.
All right, thank you very much. What you have in front of you is an ordinance that amends our administrative code. What this does is this creates a formal standing transit oversight committee. We've been, I think, quietly talking about this for a while throughout the year. And I think after last finance meeting's presentation on the transit audit and a lot of the discussion that came out of that, I think we all generally agreed that this was needed, and this formally does that. I thought that doing this through codification was a good way to do this for a couple of different reasons. One, I think formalizing this, even if it's short term, stresses the importance of it, and I think creates a formal accountability mechanism that will be beneficial and give this effort some teeth. And secondarily, this mimics a lot of a system that has worked for city government for a while. Our formal committee process, we've seen it time and time again, and even today with a lot of discussion. That formal oversight through committee has worked, and this replicates that process. I took a first stab at membership. If you look at the ordinance, I mimicked what we do already. 3 members of city council, the mayor, city controller, director of finance administration, and that's simply replicating what is in the code today from a director perspective. I know we're continuously talking about what that department looks like, regardless of what I think that role turns out to be. I think it would be valuable to have that person on this committee, and then some key leadership positions at River Valley Transit, the director of the bureau, of course, the chief financial officer, the controller, and the compliance officer there. There's a number of things, obviously, from week to week oversight, but even from a broader perspective, not only just oversight and making sure that specifics are corrected from financially, et cetera, but as we talk about what the future of River Valley Transit looks like, this is a, I think, good formal group to really hone in on what that looks like from a long-term vision, strategy, et cetera, perspective. So I'll yield the floor to comments from everybody else. That's an overview of what we got in front of us.
You got it. Bonnie?
I don't have any questions.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have any specific questions, and I think to a certain extent I'm looking forward to Thursday night's discussion, Adam, to flesh out some of this stuff, just because I know that you need to get out of here.
Understood. That's it.
But I do think that we should look at sort of the specific people serving on the committee, what roles they'll play, what the continuing role of the committee is if we do spin out an authority, et cetera, et cetera. All of that said, as we've discussed, and I appreciate you taking the lead on this, this is something we need to be handling better than we have been. So if we have no questions for Adam at this point, Bonnie, shall we forward this?
Yes, I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry, I was on the phone with the gentleman who's coming from Public Works. Yes, I pass this on to the full body of council with a positive recommendation.
Adam, do you want to second that? I'm not really sure where we stand on.
Sure, I'll second it.
He's iffy.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 And I apologize for giving this sort of short shrift, both in the sense of the full length of the meeting, and then also going with basically no discussion, because I know that you have to leave, Adam. But I think we'll just save the majority of the discussion for Thursday night, and we can all sort of flesh it out with some questions then, and see if we need to make any adaptations for second reading, et cetera.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, again, it's a starting point. When I think of oversight, there's some core positions that make sense, at least to me. But again, I'm one of seven. I certainly understand that. But we got to start somewhere, and I think this is a really good starting point to have that conversation over a first and second reading.
Yeah,
So.
I would agree. All right, thank you, Adam. We'll see you later. The final item on our agenda, aside from any related items, is item number 3, a resolution authorizing the execution of an intergovernmental lease agreement. Mayor Slaughter, you'll pardon me if I say that we will probably also, given how late we're running, give this a relatively light discussion in finance and trust the full body of council to flesh this out on Thursday
Sure.
as well. But we do have a handful of questions, or at least perhaps some things I could give you a heads up on, so that we can flesh them out more easily on Thursday. So if you can go ahead and take it away.
Yes, thank you. What you have is resolution authorizing the execution of intergovernmental lease agreement. This obviously stems from the water issues at City Hall, as I think everyone clearly is aware by now. We are in Trade and Transit 1, Trade and Transit 2, Transportation Museum and RVT temporarily, pending the ADA reports, the cost estimates on the other items, the roof, the HVAC, et cetera, which we're working through. In the interim, obviously, we need this lease agreement in place, considering that we're in transit buildings. So that's what this is right here in front of you. This was reviewed by Joe Nagy on the transit side, as well as PennDOT reviewed it. They made a few minor changes to the lease, which were incorporated. And also the FTA reviewed it after PennDOT. FTA was fine with PennDOT's changes, and they were also fine with the lease as a whole. They had no further changes, and just asked, obviously, to be kept in the loop moving forward, which clearly we will do. Just very briefly, $11 a square foot. And all of the buildings total, we're looking at 11,727 square feet, which comes to $128,997 total for all the space that the city is currently using. This is initially for a 1-year term, and then the way they put it in was that for the renewal or extension, the city shall have the right to renew the term of this lease for 2 additional 2-year periods. And of course, there's out clauses as well throughout the lease and all the other insurance, et cetera. So as I said, this was reviewed by the attorneys. This was reviewed by PennDOT and FTA. And obviously we're running late here. So, we can flesh out a few questions now or the full body Thursday.
Yeah. Bonnie, you want to take the lead on this? You want me to get started and then you can discuss?
There's so many questions here. I'll let you start, Liz, okay?
Okay. Well, there are a handful of sort of minor questions / inconsistencies that I think we can easily clear up, Derek, such as well, in the first paragraph, we don't deal with the fact that RBT as a department of the city has received certain limited federal funds for the construction of a building notice trade and transit 2, but we're utilizing space at 4 different locations that have received federal funding. The RBT building, or I'm not certain whether the Peter Hurdick Museum did receive federal funding or not, but at least Trade and Transit 1 and 2 and the RBT building, correct? And for accuracy, perhaps we need to put all of those in there.
Yes, obviously we're using those. I could check with Jill Nagy to see if that has to be in there. And if it does, we can obviously amend it and put it in there.
Got it. Got it. I'm assuming, I think I got this impression from Jill when I talked about it the other day, that the term incidental use is a little bit of a term of art in this case. That is to say, the city is using the majority of Trade and Transit 1 currently, but it's still considered an incidental use because the primary use is transit, correct?
Yes, that's my understanding after speaking with Jill and also PennDOT and FTA. Yes.
Got it. Did the city start occupying the premises in June? What was when did?
No, August. This is retroactive to August 1st.
Okay.
We started moving in. Adam, when did you remember the exact day we started? I think it was like August. I could go back and look at the exact day. I don't remember exactly off the top.
That's not all that important to me, but the lease says June.
Hey, Adam said that.
Let me see. I thought it said retroactive to August 1st, but maybe of June. Oh, there, I see. If you go down further,
okay.
it says
So
the 1 year commencing August 1st, 2021. But okay, yeah, that can be updated up top. I see that.
Yeah, that's what I mean by inconsistencies. Like, you know what I mean? Like there are just places where maybe we started working on it at X and then we finished working on it at Y. And in between times, we didn't change all the specific places in the lease. You sent us diagrams of Trade and Transit 1 and 2, but we don't have anything for the Peter Hurdick Transportation Museum or RBT. It says that all of those are depicted in Exhibit A, but we don't have like a solid Exhibit A that's attached to the lease, I guess. And we probably
yes, I can get you a solid Exhibit A for Thursday.
Yeah.
Prior to Thursday.
I think that'd be good, just so that we had, like basically when Janice files it, it goes in stapled on the back as a Exhibit A, right?
Yep, right. Yep, exactly.
Got it. I think those are my primary concerns. It says RBT shall not be making any improvements, but there were improvements made. Is that those ones are presumed to be included? There simply won't be any further?
Yes, those ones, from what I've been told, speaking with Jill, they're allowed to get the building ready to be leased, so those are covered. The city does not have to incur those costs. You can get the facilities ready for the folks that are going to be leasing it, and that's an eligible expense on their behalf. That's not on the burden of the city. Moving forward, I believe they're able to make improvements, depending on what that would be. I think the way it would have to work, this is probably more of a question for Joe Nagy, but say, there's an improvement we would like to see. It would probably just have to be reviewed, obviously, by the solicitors, PennDOT and FTA again, above what the ones we've already made to accommodate us here in the interim.
So it sounds to me like perhaps that line, and this is a question for Jill, is Jill going to be there on Thursday?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, good. It seems to me like perhaps that codicil then should say, aside from improvements made prior to the city occupying the facility, RBT will not make any further improvements without a specific city request in writing and approval from the FTA.
Right, probably, yeah, I would imagine something along those lines, Jess.
Okay. Likewise, I'm assuming it's not making any improvements on behalf of the city, nor does it intend to provide signage for the city, not RVT, correct? That's
Correct.
A on page 3, I think.
Right, just saying there, I think that's, we could have, for example, if we decide to stay longer than just this interim period, the signage would be the responsibility of the city under the current zoning and or ordinances of the city in there. Meaning, if we wanted to put, City Hall sign out front, the RVT is not going to do that. It would be our responsibility to run that through zoning, et cetera. But also at the same time, obviously working with, again, the FTA. So maybe, I don't know if that language is probably okay. But again, Joe could speak to that more clearly on Thursday.
That last sentence, I think, is probably okay, unless we need to make a note that we need to go under, we also need FTA approval.
Right.
Any such signage to be the responsibility of the city under current zoning and ordinance of the city and with approval from the Federal Transit Administration.
Right.
Okay, let me see here.
Can I ask what is going to be designated as public space?
That's any spot that the public could have access to. So, the mayor's office, treasurer's office, et cetera. Any public space that the city we'd be utilizing that would do city business.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, I think, and we can clarify this with Jill on Thursday, but I think some of these terms are specific to kind of terminology used by the FTA and the state, correct?
Yes, from my understanding, that is correct.
Okay. And so the fact that it seems like a weird terminology for us, I mean, as long as obviously it's legal and everybody's approved it, and we understand that the meaning of public space in this context is space that is not being used for transit purposes, correct?
Correct.
And that's right.
Or otherwise utilized by other folks that are leasing other parts of the building.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. But yeah, it does seem like a strange term. But okay. So got it. I'm just looking.
Let's go down to 3 about there are separate meters, but not necessarily linked to the individual leaseholders. One of the ones, I mean, how are we going to pay the utilities, say where the city clerk is? I mean, that is one whole floor, and she's utilizing a hallway. I mean, how do you separate that cost?
I believe what they have done, and I would defer to Adam Winder on how this works specifically, but they look at the bill, and I don't know how the meters are separated currently exactly. So Adam, do you know how the meters are broken down between TT1 and TT2?
Hi, Mayor, it's Renee. Adam had stepped out, but I can't answer that question. We're meeting with a consulting firm next week to look at possibly separating those meters to do individual readings for offices and floors.
Gotcha. So, and again, with all of us being temporarily located, like I'm in a kitchen right now, for example, and I'm rarely over next door in the conference. So if we could get those separated, it sounds like Bonnie will have a better answer for that, maybe by Thursday, but we're meeting next week, or Adam's meeting next week to discuss separating those out. So I believe what has been done in the past, they look at it overall and try to break it out. But if we can get them separated, obviously that would be the easiest route.
Mayor, I believe the 2 dates that the consulting firm will be here will be the 10th and the 11th to have us walk them through each building and show them the meters. And then they'll give us a price to go from there.
Thank you. So, so we'll have to be a better way to break it down, hopefully in the near future. But right now, we'll have to just look at the cost and work with FTA to see how the utilities can be done appropriately in the interim. Or it could be one of those things, yeah. So in the interim, yeah, I guess as well.
Got it. Quick other question, Derek. Page 1, under term, it says that the city is leased premises are leased to the city for a year. But further down, it mentions the rent for the term of the lease is rental rate is $11 per square foot and effective for 5 years from the commencement of this lease. But that's not the same thing. Where the lease is only for a year currently, but the rental rate of $11 per square foot applies for 5 years. Should we choose to extend the lease?
I believe that's how it works. And then there's also that clause in there that says a little further down for the renewal on page, down in item C. Determined in accordance with the 10% every 2 years based upon the base amount set forth in paragraph 4A and 4B above. So I think that's the base amount, the $11 a square foot. And then it will be determined if we renew or extend, it shall be determined with the 10%. So I think, Jill, again, I think this is another legal question for Jill, how they put it in that way, based on, I believe it's a FTA calculation. Every so many years, the rent may need to be adjusted a certain percentage. But that's a question for Jill. But I know the first year it's there. So I'll defer to Jill on that one, but I believe what it is, we have to review that every few years to see if what we're paying is correct, or does it need to be adjusted at 10% or whatever the percentage would be.
Got it. Okay, so my reading of it is that the $11 is guaranteed for 5 years, and then it goes up by 10% every 2 years. But your reading is that the $11 is guaranteed for 1 year, and then it starts to go up?
I'm not sure. I think it could be 5 years, and I think the way I read it is if we extend after that first year, 2 years after that, so I guess that would be 3 years, we have to review it at that point. But that the $11 would be, I guess the reading of that is I don't know. I guess I would defer to Jill, but that we're guaranteed $11. However, after review of the third year, it could increase. But I don't know the legality of that with the wording in there.
Okay. Well, we'll need to flesh that out with Jill. Okay, yeah, I guess, but just letting you know that I'm a little confused with the way that that goes. And likewise, there are 2 different clauses about terminating the lease, one of which gives RBT the right to terminate within 60 days for any reason, and the city to terminate within 60 days for any reason. But the other of which gives RBT the right to terminate for convenience or for any bona fide reason. I'm a little confused about why we're restating that unless convenience and bona fide reason is a different concept from the original one. So I mean, like I said, we'll flesh it out with Jill, but just in case these are any of these are things that you think that you should discuss with her before we get there. Got it. Slightly confused by C at the bottom of page 3. Liquor liability insurance of not less than $1 million, but then in parentheses it says $3 million.
I'm sorry, which page is that?
Bottom of page 3, section C, section 6, item C.
That's probably just a typo, I would imagine.
Yeah, I would assume. I'm also. Are we planning to serve alcohol?
No, we're not. That's why I think it says if applicable. No, we have obviously no intentions of serving alcohol.
Okay, so can we clarify if we need to have that in?
Yeah, we could just take that out completely, I would imagine. But
Well, I think you would have to have that because it's an event center. And maybe that's a
Yeah, but
clarification to save us.
maybe.
And
I'll
that should be
defer to
RVT,
Jill,
not
but
city.
yeah, maybe that's, but I mean, as far as what our lease agreement would be, the city would not need that in there, obviously. But maybe, I'll defer to Joe. Like, if we can take that out, obviously we can take it out, because the city, the area that we are leasing, will not need liquor liability insurance. So,
Yeah, yeah, aside from the trade and transit, the third floor trade and transit.
but
too.
that would be,
You would assume that. would be-
even during city functions, if we have committee meetings, something,
Right.
I don't think.
I mean,
if
I
it's
don't know.
somebody
I
leasing
don't bring any liquor. I can't speak to you, Derek, but.
No, for the record. But no, I mean, if it's somebody renting the facility, then that's, obviously that's separate from the city's lease agreement.
I don't think that should be in our lease.
Right, yeah, I don't
Well,
think. it
that would be
needs
an
to but-
RVT.
Right, Jill would be able to address that one more clearly than myself.
Okay. All right, yeah. So it sounds like most of these questions we should send on to Jill, but if you can try and make sure that we have the section A or what, you know what I mean, the exhibit A.
Exhibit A, yes, yep.
That would be good. All right, and okay. The one other thing that I think that I would probably ask that we have before Thursday is in the resolution itself, the rent that we're paying according to the lease, either on an annual basis or on a monthly basis. You know what I mean? So there's a dollar amount,
Yes,
a square footage amount that we're utilizing, and a dollar amount associated with it in the resolution.
yes, we can add that in for Thursday.
Okay. As well as that note about the fact that we're using more than trade and transit too, and that probably the resolution should probably reflect that. But okay, all right. Then
No,
we'll
I
just-
do another thing
Oh, sure.
that,
fine.
let's go on into why are we responsible for all the glass to clean the windows and all of that? Is that, some of the other tenants, aren't they responsible for some of this?
It's on a lease to lease. So we're not responsible just for the areas that we use. That helps offset some of the square footage cost. So if we do some of the maintenance and cleaning, snow removal, et cetera, that assists with the cost per square foot. And that's negotiated with the other lease agreements, whatever they have in their CTL Uptown. That's, if you want to drop it a little bit, we did $11 a square foot. But for example, say, tenant A does not want to do any of snow removal, then we could say, okay, it's going to be $12 a square foot. We'll cover snow removal, things of that nature. But this, we kept $11 and said we'll handle, some of the maintenance items to be able to offset some of that cost per square foot.
Who's taking care of that now? Who's taking care of the snow removal and the cleaning of the property? Who was doing that before we moved in there?
Yeah, that, from my understanding, the RVT maintenance crew.
So that wasn't
And
part of the other lease, of the other tenants.
I don't have their lease agreements in front of me right now, so I can't speak to that definitely. But I could pull up their lease agreements and see, but I don't have that information right in front of me at the moment. As far as their lease, to say.
Well, I think to Derek's point, the question is, are we paying for those services or are we providing them? And I think the further question is it easier for us to provide them than pay for them or not?
Well, and some of them, for example, like Choice Cleaners, that's who we use. That's who did City Hall. That's who's here right now. It's, we have that service, so it just made sense. That on. So
Okay.
Just, these are the things that you want clarified in the lease.
Yeah.
And it's,
yeah, that's for our lease. Like I said, I can't speak to the other lease agreements at this point without having them in front of me.
Got it. Derek, just to be clear, when we talk about the premises, are we discussing just the lease premises of the city, correct? Not the entire premises of Trade and Transit 1 and 2?
Correct. And Transportation Museum and RVT. Yeah, just the premises that the city is leasing as part of this agreement. Correct.
So
Not the entire building.
Yeah. Right. So when we're cleaning things, when we're cleaning windows, et cetera, we're not responsible for the portion occupied by CTL or by Uptown. Right.
That's correct.
Okay.
Right.
Got
Just
it.
our area. Yep.
And for me, my very last question is on the very last paragraph of the lease. The parties agree to the exclusive concurrent original jurisdiction of the Court of Common Pleas of Berks County, Pennsylvania. What does Berks County have to do with our lease?
Yes, that's a typo, Bonnie. That's a typo.
Okay. Yeah, well, and I would have some questions about, there are a handful of times when either the city is insuring something or holding RVT harmless for insurance purposes, but it's all the same insurance. I mean, these are questions for Jill. Likewise, we indemnify RVT and its officers, board members, employees, and agents, but RVT is the city. So I'm not certain if, you know what I mean?
Yeah, there was question about, and I don't remember off the top of my head, when we started working on this originally about that insurance piece. And PennDOT had a question on that as well. And Jill answered it, and I don't remember off the top of my head.
Got it. So yeah, these are questions that we'll have for her, but as long as she knows that.
But there was that same exact question was asked when we were.
Got it. Okay. All right. So we'll deal with it then on Thursday. Okay. Bonnie, any further questions?
Nope.
Okay. Shall we pass this on to the full body of council?
I would pass it on with no recommendation.
Yeah, I think we may as well. All right. So
I make a motion, we pass it on to full body of council with no recommendation.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, Mayor Slaughter, and we'll look at it further with Jill on Thursday.
Yep, thank you. Yep.
Okay, the final item on our agenda today, item number 7, is any related items. I would introduce the third quarter financial statements that we didn't ever get last time. Only we are already 3/4 of an hour overdue on beginning the Public Works meeting. Consequently, I think that we will simply